Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Chinloo Lama. I'm joined here with two of my colleagues, well, actually as panel speakers, but also two more in the audience. Um, Yun Lee is one of the ones who will be helping me speak about the user experience side of things. And Rachel will also help us speak about projects that we've done for product definition engineering and for on the side of talent acquisition. If you guys have any questions specifically about interning or anything about Dassault, working there, they would, Suzanne and Suzanne will both be available to answer that question. For this particular presentation, we'd love to talk more about efforts at Solidworks, where we are looking at advancing specific areas around inclusion, diversity, and equity as listed in the title, but really in every aspect of what we do, both in user experience design as well as product definition. Really the only difference between those two groups, one focuses more on the functionality, which is the product definition team, and the other one works more on the workflow and experience, which is the user experience team. But we often work hand in hand. So I like to dive into some projects. What you see on the screen, you're probably very used to PowerPoints. We are actually working with a platform solution here. So that's also one of those things that help us advance and innovate on the ways of communication. So fingers crossed, there might be some bumps, but I'll do my best with what we have here. And what I do like doing as we explore areas of what we do is kind of tell stories around why we do this. And I'm sure you've heard lots of presentations so far around all the methodology and techniques. Here for today, for our presentation, I'm going to focus more on the human side and the reasoning and aspects of that. So let me dive into this particular presentation. So this is more along the lines of working with customers and also internal design teams. And mostly diversity in my mind is the idea, I don't know why this color is so bright, but hopefully you can still read it. This is a quote I found that I think represents quite a bit on, I think, the aspect of designing for diversity, because we are so often focused in looking at the problem that we're solving and just worrying about solving the problem, but never really thinking about the people who will be benefiting from that solution. So like this, it says we spend a lot of time building the bridge, designing the bridge, but not enough time thinking about the people who are crossing it. And true enough, if you ever think about the aspect of projects that we do, I really apologize, the bright colors, something happened in the transition of this tool, is that we focus a lot on how it looks to us personally. We don't think very much about other people in the industry or in the audience that may not see the world the same way we do. So there's lots of different types of awareness we need to have as we design our product. So in this particular case, I want to show some projects that are talking about visual impairment, including color blindness, and some cultural taboos that we never really think about if we get too grounded in one particular culture as we create our visuals. In the effort, basically to set the stage, across the world, it has been researched to be that 8% or 1 in 12 males do have this colorblind affliction, and there are variations of types, although every single person would see the world with a little different way of color interpretation. But in general, there's a way to actually scientifically measure whether or not you're colorblind, which has to do with if you can process red, green, and whatnot, levels of blue. So this is just some data to kind of give you an understanding. And interesting enough, Solidworks, traditionally our audience have primarily been Caucasian males. It's only recently that's kind of shifted a little bit. But if you think about it, if 8% of the entire human race tend to suffer from color blindness, and majority of our audience, probably 98% of them, are making up a number, is Caucasian male, we do have a significant number, 1 in 12 users who would not necessarily see our UI the same way that we intend it to be. So in this effort, and I'll let Yunli jump in if she wants to talk about this particular screen that's slowly loading right now, is showing actually a project that she has been working with our design team on to kind of improve plot displays. Yunli?
Yes. So for this particular example, because we will be showing different curves for the plot to basically showcase, for example, the speed or like the position changes for a particular machine, and then of course, like we will offer like a set of default color for users to choose from. But it is somewhat like challenging, like looking back now, it is somewhat challenging, like for choosing the set of colors. Like first of all, like Chinloo mentioned, we would like to like be inclusive and like consider people with maybe potential visual impairment. And then so the thing that we look at is like how this color go well with each other, because it's likely that people will show all this color together. So it's like that kind of limit like the option that we have, and then we have to see how they balance each other out. And then in the process, our visual designer, like every time she provided us with the set of color, she always like also offer additional option for the with the color blindness filter on. So as you can see, maybe for group 4, the color, even though like it might look normal, like like between the red color and the brown color, but if you look at it under the color brightness filter for group 4, it's a little bit difficult to distinguish them. So this is a good thing to maybe like bear in mind and then look at them. But still, I would say it's like it's an important thing to consider, and it's like a fun project to work on.
Cool, thanks, Yunli.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so in just to elaborate, we every time we have to do any kind of revamp or revisit on existing graphics, we always put in this filter testing on all of the things we introduce. So for many, many years, I know this is kind of hard to see stacked up, but the second row represents the icon set for, I would say, more than a decade, maybe even more, of just having these yellow and green icons. And if you look at this filtered version, which is all the way at the bottom, the 4th row, is not very easy to see with the most common color blindness, because everything just kind of washes out and becomes yellow. So even though we take the painstaking effort of highlighting those, like for example, in the fillet, the rounded portion of the icon is highlighted. So we have reason for using a highlight color, but it's completely lost for someone who is colorblind. So in that sense, we actually shifted over to another color, which is this gray and blue tones of white that seem to be capturing that effort better. And you can actually see in a more close-up view that we not only experienced changing the color, but we also thought about rethinking the orientation and differentiating between icons that are very similar, and the shape really is so subtle that it could be easily overlooked. So we explored shapes and texture and things like that, not just color, to help communicate the differences. This is just some feedback from some of our users, and we definitely got negatives and positive on both sides. So you can't rely primarily on user feedback when you do A/B testing or icon design, kind of design validation, because even though you're probably going to have feedback that supports both, you really have to go in and do thorough technology-based scientific analysis of certain things to really understand if you're on the right track. But of course, user validation is always very important. Just a few more images on this topic before we move on is that, we continue to always consider this in every aspect of our software, including color choices for highlights, for selections. In fact, we're exploring even more levels of color blindness, not just the 2 most common, which is the I don't know how to pronounce this, protanopia and Renopia. Basically, those are the two that are most common, red blind and green blind. But we've definitely explored further to ensure that our icons are still speaking the message that we hope they can carry on. And other visual impairment that we also are quite sensitive to is the percentage of people who actually just have vision, like distance issues, like nearsightedness, farsightedness, things like that, that they're either born with or that they develop over time. And here's some quick facts about just some general understanding of the percentage of the population. Having said that, by addressing that aspect of our software, where we make sure that our icons are vector based and it can scale to whatever screen resolution, it allowed people who maybe need to crank up their resolution to 200, 300, 400 for various reasons, either being because their eye vision is requires things to be enlarged or requires it to just look properly on a 4K, 5K monitor. Those are all reasons for you wanting the icons to scale properly. So the top row shows you the current version with the vector icons. Our traditional icon you see is just minuscule, even though the text are included or are enlarged. So there's a lot of these aspects that we explored. And by making these icons more versatile, we were able to then explore ideas like modes, like light mode, dark mode, medium light, that also help with contrast improvement for our UI. So it basically exploring the ideas of visual impairment and how we support it opened doors to so much more we could do in our software and also help so many people in return. Moving on to yet another kind of diversity of awareness that we try to perform is this idea of cultural taboos. Um, and this is one of those things that if you don't have the diversity in the design team or the people who are helping to shape the vision, you won't learn about these things until it's too late. It goes out the door and you're going to have to spend a lot of expensive resources and time to now pull things back, redesign. So a lot of these visual issues that we deal with, like visions of people's legs in between their legs, underneath their feet, things like that, it may seem very trivial to a Western culture. But for example, in this case, like an Asian culture, when they see an image between the legs, it's actually quite offensive. It's something that is extremely humiliating. So would you know this unless you have the right people in the group to kind of point that out? Similarly, in Asian and Arab cultures, the foot is considered to be a very unclean part of the body. So pointing it at anyone is just a huge offense. And yet we have so many imagery that we use that have these like bottom up views. And we are still struggling today to find the right imagery to communicate the right things. In fact, we recently just had to pull back a welcome screen that we designed for one of our web products that on the surface seemed like a really nice demonstration of our software, designing, the soul of a sneaker. But with this concept of, is this image offensive to certain cultures? Yeah, it could be. So let's rethink this. And also, some other aspects, and I only just learned about this as I was doing research, is that, an image of 3 people may seem quite awkward and offensive to someone in Cambodia because, they have the belief that if you take photos of people in threes, the person in the middle is going to be doomed for bad luck. Similarly, in Asian cultures, any kind of defacing or anything that's put on the face of someone also is very offensive and negative and bad luck. And of course, we happen to just place our search field right over this poor man's face. So lots of things we had to rethink and redesign. But again, if you catch this ahead of time, if you have the right people in the room and you catch it ahead of time, you wouldn't find yourself in those situations. In case you guys are interested, there are places you can get really quick validation on color blindness and various tests online. Google it, find the tools. Adobe has a great feature in Photoshop that helps you even just do a quick check. I'm sensitive to the time, so I want to move ahead to the next topic. So with regards to diversity, that is definitely something that you have to consider for both your recruits in participating in your user feedback as well as the design team. In the concept of kind of creating equity, I saw as one of the efforts we're doing is kind of introducing equity in the space of content creation and just representation. What I mean by that is that if you have the right kind of variety in your content, in the content that we test our software against, we also will then will reach some level of equity for the types of audience we are trying to design for. So while we wait for this to load, maybe I can get Rachel to jump in and speak a bit about some of the models she's been working on to put our software that we designed to test.
Yeah, of course. So a lot of times when people create their designs in something that is perceived to be strictly engineering software, they go straight for engines because that's very mechanical. Everybody's used to seeing gears and linkages and things like that, but not everybody cares about engines. So I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm sitting on a chair right now. My computer's on a table, and that's furniture. Furniture is all over the place. So that's what I've started doing with my models. I've started creating models like this bookshelf right here that are more commonplace. Anybody can use. It doesn't have this perception that, ah, yes, this is for engineering. It is more inclusive to anybody who's using it. And this actually segues into a different topic later on with other models. I don't know if you want to talk about the hand now, Chinloo, or save that for later. You're muted. I can talk about it now if you want.
Oh, sorry, I was speaking as I'm muted. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, so we can wait on that for a little bit. I think that would be a nice way to kind of end the presentation. But I was hoping to actually show the model. It's not loading properly. So let's see how this is going. It is still loading. So it could be that I'm both trying to zoom and present at the same time. So we'll come back to this. We do have other models to demonstrate exactly what Rachel was speaking about, but hopefully that will be ready when we get there. So we also have some issues running this right now. This is like performance anxiety on our software. Um, so let's see, maybe this will be better. Um, yeah, so moving on to this idea of bringing equity to the content and also to who we represent, um, we also wanted to kind of turn things inside out, upside down, and rethink: are we really truly providing something for the audience we want? If we're always trying to solve the same problems with the same group of audience and same group of designers, we probably wouldn't necessarily look at the problem the same way. So asking the right questions. So by doing that, we may be able to open the doors up to people who are not traditionally CAD users or familiar with engineering, and maybe introduce them to the design process more gently. And so we started to explore asking children, do they know what, and this is not like not talking about 4-year-olds. We're talking about like teenagers or high schoolers, if they knew about CAD and what it means and modeling and 3D, to a kid who's probably younger, and you ask them about CAD, they would not know what it is. So it's just a 3-letter word that sounds funny. But to that point, we actually started exploring the idea of what it means to design and build using software that is accessible to everyone, free and easily usable. And I was hoping to be able to run some of these, but I can actually do it through these links as well. And so what we actually did come up with was a series of apps that's run digitally online. So as long as you have access to internet at the library or anywhere, you can just get onto a computer and actually come to on a website and then begin play. And in here, there's various apps that allow you to, basically what we wanted to do is, so through interviews and understanding of how kids go from idea in their head to ideas in their hand, having made them, we wanted to give them all the tools that they're familiar with. So this kind of capture it thing is more like a scrapbook tool. And it actually allows you to do a lot of grabbing images that you either found online or inspirations that you grab with your phone. And there you can actually start pulling together like a mood board, an idea board, and whatnot. And as you decide that this is something that you do want to do and make into a 3D shape, we created this kind of modeling tool that's not like anything like SolidWorks that anyone's familiar with. It's actually very much like playing with Play-Doh or clay. You move things around, you squish it, you add little things, and you can actually, after you shape everything, you can also hop over to some place where you can style it. So similar to an engineer doing decals and renderings for a kid to make something look pretty, it's usually painting on it. So we made an ability to draw exactly right onto the model surface, so you can't draw anywhere else. And then you can add little stickers. That's usually what I do. I add stickers to make it look pretty in real life and in digital life. And so you kind of have this idea of like matching what is familiar with people who make things to people who make things in life as well as making things digitally. Another aspect of the tool we wanted to make very fun and learnable for everyone, kids of all ages, including kids who are 99, can go in and play with this as if it's like a spirograph, a Tinker Toy, something that you can connect together and run it on a motor and get this idea of feedback from something that you've created with mechanisms. So this kinematic designing tool becomes more of a play tool. And then ultimately, for going from an idea to something in your hand, this allows you to actually take the model and bring it to life in various ways. So in one way, it could be 3D printing it out and having it right in your hand. But for those who don't have access to 3D printers, you can actually, what was very quickly run through just now is print it out as an origami box. And actually, let me see if I can run it from the beginning so you can see it again. This little penguin, when chosen to the print, you can see that it basically takes all the orthogonal view of the model and flatten it out onto a box shape that can be cut out and made into a box again. So we're kind of sneaking and being very strategically teaching people who are not familiar with CAD the orthogonal views of drafting. And really, that's what it is. When you need to communicate to someone what a 3D model looks like, it is to break it down in those, or flattening down into those views, and then folding them up into the 3-dimensional space we live in to understand what that shape looks like. So it's really kind of this idea of taking down all the traditions of what CAD engineering is, breaking it down to things that even ourselves when we were 8 could consume and understand. That was a way for us to really understand how to improve our software that's designed for professionals. If we can take away the hurdles that it takes to learn a very sophisticated software, and it feels like it's playing with a toy when they're using it, that would be the ultimate goal for us. So that was kind of a way to kind of rethink what it means. And let me try to get back to this since, oh, please load. Thank you. Maybe not. This is a way to kind of bring back the idea of inclusion and allowing them to understand the various aspects of design. I don't think this is going to work again. All right, let's move on to the next thing, and we can actually have Rachel. Oh gosh. It doesn't seem to be liking this, Rachel.
Oh no.
We tried this right before the meeting. Let's see if we can try it again. So she was talking about a design that she was working on. And basically, this is our aspect of kind of exploring inclusion. So not only on focusing on models that we make, but also for the outcome of once we put the time into testing our software and making models with it, can it move on to supporting someone else? I'm not quite sure why this is not loading.
Well, I can still talk about it and hope that you guys can imagine what I'm saying. So one of
Sorry.
these models that I had to show for you today was a 3D printed prosthetic arm. And I designed it. It was my senior design project when I was in college. And the inspiration behind it was we had heard of Fab Labs, we had heard of other communities online where people were creating these low-cost prostheses that were available for anybody to just make so that they could be readily available for anybody. You didn't have to spend all kinds of money to get this very advanced thing that you, especially for a child, would outgrow in a couple of years and need to get another one. So our design made in SolidWorks was completely parametric. We had all kinds of equations. We had it driven by 4 specific variables. So our specific arm that we designed was for somebody that had about this much forearm left. And so our measurements were based off of your other arm. So you could say, okay, my hand is this big. I have this much space here. And then I forget what the other two were. I think it was length this way. And then another diameter dimension. And that would calculate the entire arm. We had multiple hand sizes as well, uh, one my hand size, one larger, and then one smaller. And that was so it could fit multiple people and be useful for people of different ages as well. Something else that we had to consider was the way it was being manufactured. So in our model, if it ever loads, you will see that the forearm part is completely solid. It doesn't have a hole for the forearm to go in, and that was done deliberately because we had read that prostheses that aren't properly fit will actually injure the user. And to avoid that, we said, okay, if we make this solid, then anybody can go to a fab lab and get a 3D scan of their arm and then remove that piece of material so that it fits perfectly. And that was very important to us in the design. Something else that we had to consider is not just who was wearing it, but who was building it. So there were multiple versions of our design where the hand was actually pretty complicated. I don't know about the rest of you, but if you just, I don't know, during this project, I learned a lot about how hands move. And fingers have 3 joints. Our original hand design also featured a 3-jointed finger, but we discovered that, well, depending on who's making it and also depending on how it's being used, things that have more pieces tend to break in more places. So to reduce that, we said, okay, let's make it a 2-joint finger because, well, I can still pick something up if I just have this joint here and not necessarily this small one. To do that, though, we did have to sacrifice the precision grip, but we were able to keep a power grip. What else did I have to say about this?
Just trying to give you a larger thumbnail because I don't think it's loading. I'm sorry.
No.
So yes, this is the model. If you guys can squint and see the model, it's some reason it's not loading for us. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's good. We can, I'm trying to see if there's a way to salvage the content that we can't seem to have loaded here. I can potentially go through thumbnails also on a few of the models that I was trying to load. Basically, one of the elements too that I wanted to show is that we do want to showcase the variety. And we had talked about not thinking primarily on traditional pictures of, I think what people are familiar with are things like these types of things, engines, generators. When you look at CAD and what is used to design, you think of these things. But of course, there's also instruments that you can design. I think, I don't know if this is going to run. Hairbrushes. We have our customer base go from designing tractors and airplanes all the way to people who design purses and combs and brushes. So to always put our software through a particular type of modeling exercise that doesn't include some of these other materials would only just mean that we didn't test it for the robustness that's necessary for the diverse products we support. And to speak to other aspects, unfortunately, it looks like this is really never going to want to load. Another part of this kind of designing for good, having cool objects to design for, and let me see. I'm not quite sure if this is going to load.
But the thumbnail is like at least showing in the other one, I think.
Oh, you guys can see the thumbnail? Oh, wait, that worked.
Oh, the thumbnail on the right side. Oh.
Yeah, let me do this actually, because I laid it out. Probably better to, let me try to do this. There we go. Okay. Well, good idea, Junli. Thanks for thinking out of the box. We could try the thumbnails. So for along the same line of designing for good that Rachel was mentioning for the hand model that she worked with, I'm sad we can't show the full model, but in that effort, it was inspired by the Enable Hands project. Hopefully you guys are familiar with it. So not only are we putting our software through testing how to design for those, but also as a result, being able to participate in these goodwill efforts. So in a similar vein, a group of us from Solidworks have been engaged with the organization called Magic Wheelchair. And it allowed us to really push our software, our know-how, and our tools available to us to really go from the concept to manufacturing or fabbing to providing the final result to a recipient. That whole process really taught us a lot about what our customers go through and also gave us a huge emotional paycheck at the end of the day. And one of those things also paralleled like supporting the inclusion effort on the side of Magic Wheelchair, where they really want to allow the ability to give an individual, just like in this quote from Ryan Weimer, the founder, that, you know, for his son, when he's in this costume, it just, all those stares just disappear. And when they do, you know, the stare of pity and curiosity and just like awkwardness transform into stares of admiration and just awe because they're superstars for just that moment. So it just, to him, you know, it just takes away, makes that disability disappear. And that was kind of this idea of, you know, how do we help reach that final result, but also use our software to do that similar mirrored inclusion, understanding, you know, putting ourselves in their shoes and understanding like how it feels. So in the effort on one of our builds, we were designing a monster truck costume for Jonah right here. Cute little guy who has a huge personality. His affliction is something that basically fuses his joints together. And he's not able to move, barely able to swing his arm, but he has dexterity in a couple of his fingers. So he's able to drive his own electric wheelchair. So he's always loved monster truck, and he has a huge personality. So when we asked him and had him be part of our design process, he said, I want to feel like I'm driving this vehicle. I don't want to sit on top of it. I want to feel like I'm in it. So it was quite an effort for us to figure out how to design this thing so that he could still see where he's going, but feel like he's driving it. And it's not so large that he can't get through certain doors in areas. So we went through the effort of designing, putting his image and the wheelchair he's into the space. Luckily, we had partners who actually use our software to design the very wheelchair that he uses, and we were able to collaborate and get all the pieces together. We even used VR to kind of experience what it would feel like if we were at his height inside this thing. Can we see? So this is kind of what you're seeing here. And really gave him all the things he wanted. He wanted to feel like a superhero on that day. He doesn't want people to see his wheelchair, so we had to find a way to obscure his wheels with these LEDs that really even just made it so much more awesome. And he was one that really, you know, the effort in us designing not only the product for him, but the experience of the reveal was key, because he really wanted to have a big like he loves being the center of attention. So that's exactly what we did. We had Thomas, the driver of Max D, come and speak to him. He got to basically, I don't know how this is coming through Zoom, but he's doing donuts basically with his costume. And the camera crew there was chasing him all up and down the parking lot. And he was getting autograph requests from other drivers of other monster trucks. He got his own wheels, have his own initials, so it was like a really blown out, like awesome experience for him. And he continued to experience this costume even on a daily basis. We designed all of the panels to be removable and easy to assemble. So he hung them up in his room, or his parents did, and he was able to continue to experience it. Similarly, or not actually quite opposite on the reveal, but similarly in the effort on our end, we went through the same process for a different build. We interviewed the family, talked to Ben. Ben is not as vocal. His affliction is called smooth brain, which takes away a lot of his automatic behaviors like swallowing, talking, and breathe. A lot of things that he doesn't. It takes effort on him to have to do a lot of that. So we worked a lot with his reactions, looking at a gallery of photos. We had him look through. We kind of knew he loved motorcycles. His uncle, who's right here, is his inspiration. He's like a huge collector, and so we wanted to of Indian motorcycles. So we wanted to kind of inspire and connect all of those points to both provide something that would make sense for Ben as well as his family. And for Ben, being someone who's sensitive to sounds and noise and can be easily impacted by all of the chaos, we worked with the family to make a very intimate reveal at a museum, private experience for just his family and friends. And it was just exactly, we took the time to understand how he wanted to be treated, and also made him feel like the best special person for that day. And you can kind of see he was completely enthralled by the design, and we had a great time working on this and sizing it. But again, it's our effort in looking at every aspect of the problem that we're trying to solve that allowed us to have a successful experience. And I think that was the last one. What I'm sad about is I can't show you this one, but perhaps if we take some questions, this thing will finally load and we can maybe show some of the content that's been created by some of our outside box thinkers in our company who's using their creativity on creating really cool models. So is it okay if we open up to questions?
Yeah, if anyone wants to go ahead and submit questions via chat, or you can raise your hand in Zoom. You can go ahead and unmute yourself afterwards. We have one question. What's been your favorite design project that you have each participated in?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I have lots. Jump in, Rachel and Yunli, if you guys have any.
That's a really hard question because I like to make things a lot. I guess it really depends on what type of design project. There's personal design projects, there's academic design projects, and then stuff I do for my job, which my job is to design things. So there's a lot to choose from. But probably from a professional environment, my favorite project would be working on VR. And I did that with Yun Lee. Oh, that reminds me, something I forgot to say earlier. One of the things that we didn't think to include until it came testing time was um, the handedness of who is using the product. So in VR, typically you'll have two controllers, right? And depending on what headset you're using, the controllers can be identical in either hand, or there can be a left controller and a right controller. I'm left-handed, so I discovered very quickly that we put all of our controls on the right-hand controller. And when I was using a headset that had a designated this is the left side, this is the right side, I didn't I realized that at least on the neutral controller, I was switching them. And when it came time to the designated ones, I was having a tough time because I can't really switch the controllers, otherwise my fingers won't press the buttons. And that was something that I wanted to bring up earlier, but I had forgotten, is just paying attention to who is using your products and also who is making your products.
Yeah, I would say that I would probably also say the VR project because that's the first, almost like the first project that I work on since I joined Solidworks. So I'm somewhat attached to it. It's like maybe like the first time that I actually walked through the whole process in like a professional setting. So I'm always like have fond memory of that project. And then I think what I also like about that project, maybe as a UX designer, is that the product manager back then is like someone who really liked to take the whole team, at least me, Rachel and I, to visit customers, and we got to visit like different customer on site, even sometimes drive like 5 hours if it's like somewhere up in Maine, and then like I try to see how our products are used in their like actual work environment. Like for VR, it's like I always remember that it's like very cool that at one time we got to actually bring like our products to their site, and then at that time they're actually building the products in a big warehouse. And then like, so when we actually show our VR products to them and they got to see their model in virtual reality and then compare to the actual thing that they're building outside, and then like describing their workflow to us and seeing them in like actually on site and hearing all those pain points and maybe all those cool ideas that they have during conversation. So as a designer, that's like a really wonderful experience to have, to actually being like inside the people that you're designing for and you're hearing them. So I'm always like love that project. Yes.
Cool. Yeah, so I would say something I'm working on that I haven't really included in this presentation, and Yunli brought it up early as we're prepping, is I'm designing a lot of projects at home, especially during COVID, that does sustainable living. So I've explored aquaponics. We've designed like a aquaponics system that looks like furniture, and it's actually really functional. So all winter I had peas and beans and lettuce growing out of it, and I actually expanded to a second system. So one is upstairs where it's warm, and the other one in the basement where it's cooler. So I now have like a multi-zone climate aquaponics system going. So it's really fun. It really does open my eyes to the ingenuity that is out there for people who are quote unquote farmers, people who there's stereotype that's been built around agriculture and just the folks who are in agro environments, that maybe they're not as high tech or they don't understand technology as much, which is completely not true. So as I'm learning more about this, there's so much ingenuity out there. I was reading or watching this video of a aquaponics, or I think it was a hydroponics area, where they have everything in the greenhouse. And the designers made these miniature drones that would fly autonomously. And actually they were going around zapping or just like headbutting little pests that were like basically landing on these plants. And it was like a pest control tool because they don't want to use chemicals or anything. So these little drones are just like pecking at things. And I was completely geeked out on that. So yeah, it's like things like this that I get excited about, where exploring new areas where innovation and technology and know-how can be beneficial. So good question. If there's no question, I have a question for Yunli and Rachael. I've been around Dassault and SolidWorks for almost 13 years now. And I'm an old fart when it comes to like getting stuck in the ways that we do. But both Yunli and Rachael are only a couple 3 years ago, they've been involved in our company. So I love to hear from you guys, your learnings that you can share with the students who are listening. What are some challenges you face? What are some things you're proud of? Share some of those stories. I probably should have prepped you guys before this.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like a specific challenge to me because my native language is not English. So that's when I first like joined the company. And then back then when I tried to like, as a designer, I think I know how to maybe design all the like user interface properly. I have the whole design thinking behind like maybe each like UI. But in the process of like presenting them to the whole team, at least at the beginning, I always feel like have a little big problem in terms of like properly like explaining the ideas behind it, so that maybe it's more easy for the whole team to consume. At least that's the challenge that I experienced at the beginning. And then, but I think this is something that it's definitely like will improve over time. But the other thing is that I feel like I gradually maybe learn more ways, and then to maybe overcome this. I try like instead of maybe directly like showing my design like in front of the team, I try to maybe explain like more the thinking behind it ahead of time. And also just I feel like at least at the beginning, it's a bit easier for me to explain things in writing. So I try to convince myself to feel comfortable doing that, even if I didn't explain anything very well. Like even in the meeting, I try to maybe write down like the thought process behind it and share with the team afterwards. And then of course, by writing things down, like gradually, I think it improves my overall like the ability to like communicate vocally as well. So I think maybe that's one of the challenges that I think I experience and maybe overcome a little bit, hopefully, in the process. Yeah.
I think for me, my biggest challenge is background knowledge. So I've worked on a couple of different teams. I started as an intern and my internship had absolutely nothing to do with my current job. So for various things, I didn't need background knowledge. We needed to know what was going on right now out in the world. And that was super easy because here I am, this young person. I know everything that's on the internet, right? But then later on, and after my internships, when I have my full-time job, and we come up with projects that says, okay, users are asking for this functionality. Let's see how it works in other areas of our software. And that's sometimes where I end up drawing a blank, because a lot of the times my colleagues are the original designers and they just know these things because they're the ones who made them up however many years ago. And here I am, this new person. I mean, not that new anymore, but this happens a lot less frequently now. Here I am, this new person who has no concept of, oh, you made this very specific design decision 10 years ago for this exact reason. And then I have to go find that out. I do find it out, but it's very important to always know that you don't know everything and not be afraid to ask, because that's how you learn and grow.
Very well said. I want to also add that I've worked very closely with Yinli and Rachel in these meetings, and I'm always constantly impressed at the strength that they bring into the conversation, because as when I was new to a position, I knew how hard it was to kind of sound legitimate, to have the confidence, and to be able to make sure that your point is heard, especially being a young female engineer or designer. But being in these work groups, that project teams that they are in, it's really nice to see that though majority of our teams tend to be male, and focus often just shifts to conversations and also experience. They've been around for quite a bit. So like Rachel said, there's always this like wealth of knowledge that just assumes that everyone knows, and loud voices. So if you're not, you don't have the kind of stance strong enough to get into the conversation, you tend to be drowned out. So, but in both cases, I think Rachel and Yinli have built up this I don't even know if it's really building out, or just you guys do have this internal confidence that goes in. And I think for Yinli, her concern about her English not being her first language has just kind of disappeared. I don't think in any of our meetings so far it has ever been an issue. I think it really was that confidence that was built afterwards, and having teammates who really value their input and share the fact that they were glad that they took the time to speak up, and it made them think about things differently. So that really speaks a lot to kind of the point of this presentation, where we're talking about being heard, included, and actually treated equally, no matter your experience, has been demonstrated in real life by these guys. So I'm glad they can be part of the panel. It does not look like my page is going to load. So I'm going to go back to this page and just for you guys to see the folks that are on the panel. If there are questions also to other folks, Suzanne looks like she's muted, but if there are any questions about that, also feel free to ask. I'll try to see if I can come up with other topics.
We actually have one more question.
Oh, good.
So a lot of our designers in the competition really want to be as inclusive as possible when they're creating their prototypes. Has there been anything in terms of design accessibility that you guys have learned along your career that you think would surprise people, whether it's a common myth or some sort of unexpected way in terms of like doing research to become more inclusive?
Yes.
Yeah,
Are you
go
going to
ahead.
talk about the form we have to fill out?
No, you do that, yes.
So I don't remember what it's called, but there is a form that every company that has a product has to fill out. And it's basically how accessible is your product? And we go down this list and we're learning, okay, we can do this, we can do this, we can support people who are colorblind. But then there are other things that either aren't applicable because we're software, not a physical thing. But then there are other things like, oh, if somebody like is completely blind, do we have voice controls to help them? I don't know. Like things like that. And that's how we discover things sometimes.
What Rachel's referring to is the VPAT. So it's called the Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. So if you want to Google that, it's something that all product manufacturers ought to fill out. This is a North American, I think is actually a US thing. It meets the Section 508 standards. And it really is a questionnaire that you fill out and say, my product, be it software or physical product, meet these things. And like Rachel mentioned, you would have to basically say whether or not it supports things like tabbing through your UI. I mean, that is one of those things that we have yet to do well in our company, where if you were to run the whole software with only tab and enter and see if you can do how much of your software can actually pass that test. Because if you think about it, anyone who's using assistive devices because either they can't use their fingers, their hands, and they're only using their foot or their head to interact with your UI, then they really only have a handful of controls that they can interact with. So you can't always rely on like middle mouse button or these random things, not randoms, but these things that are not always accessible to the devices that everyone has. So this template is a great thing to measure your product against. I would, just like Rachel said, definitely research on this, and we've done quite a few of these on various products we have, and that's when we learn how poorly we support certain things, and then that's back to the drawing board kind of thing.
Yeah, I think speaking of middle mouse button, it reminds me of the recent project that Rachel and I are working on. It is like one thing, maybe because we are a CAD like software, like normally we will assign different like function to the like mouse button, like rotate, pen and stuff. And then so when we're considering a new feature that like we require mouse gesture, we still like when we come up with something and then like I think it's like Chinloo was reminding us, hey, remember there are people who only have like a 2-button mouse, and then don't forget about them, and then making sure that like you need to design for people who use those as well.
Yeah, part of the whole designing for the next generation, I didn't mention too much about it, is that it forces us to rethink. Like if right now we're designing software that's not going to come out until 2 years from now. And in 2 years, someone who's in high school could be in the workforce, or someone who's in college could be in the workforce. So what are the things that they have access to? Mobile devices, mobile phone, they have gaming consoles, they have these other things that they're familiar with, but then we force them into these workstations that's stuck to 3-button mice, and just we have to think about those types of user scenarios and setup that is more suitable, because then what we do is if we force them into a required environment, the learning curve to get into that environment would consume the time that they would otherwise be very productive. So it's those things that you think about, leveraging existing knowledge that the new workforce and the new creatives are familiar with. So that's a lot of stuff that we internally as a software culture, we've been only really designing software that's installed on a really like strong machine, but now we're slowly moving into the web-based kind of app and really seeing that people can indeed design on a phone. And what do we do that at that point, you know? So that's been really fun. So I've been talking quite a bit. I think we're down to the last minute. Are there any more questions?
I don't think so, but if anyone else has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. But I'll take this time to say thank you on behalf of Forge and Catalyst. We really appreciate you guys coming out to this event and kind of sharing your insights on how you can best become an inclusive designer. But yeah, we really are grateful for your knowledge and everything like that. So I hope you have a good rest of your weekend.
Yeah, thank you. You have all of our LinkedIn connections, and I think a few of us are still on Slack. So if you have any questions following, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.